Hello and welcome, movie lovers, to It's Been Real, the podcast where we dissect films purely for the love of it all without any formal training. I'm Hannah Murray,
And I'm Graham Hack.
and today we're going to be breaking down a double feature. We're going to be getting into Schindler's List and Life is Beautiful. Let's get real.
And here we go.
I got a bad feeling about this.
But you have heard of me.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Wax on, wax off.
My mom always said life was like a box of chocolates.
Life finds a way.
The hard is what makes it great.
And in this moment, I swear, we are infinite.
So let's get into the episode. We have Schindler's List, 1993, directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Liam Neeson, Ralph Fiennes, Ben Kingsley, and a bunch more. It's got a stacked cast. And we have Life is Beautiful, 1997, the Italian film directed and co-written and starring Roberto Benigni, and starring his wife, Nicoletta Braschi, and Giorgio Cantarini as his son.
Important to note here, folks, that we, as amateurs, also that expands out to name pronunciation. So
Absolutely. My Italian is rusty, is all get out. So, all right. So, getting into the films, the reception of each film was pretty great. So, Schindler's List, we had it grossed 96.1 million in the US and Canada, over 321.2 million worldwide. It was nominated for 12 Academy Awards, won 7, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Original Score, Best Cinematography, and more. What I didn't know, this was Spielberg's first win for Best Picture and Best Director.
that's actually crazy. I did not realize that.
I know.
Considering, I mean, I know his catalog was not as robust then as it is now, but he was not unknown back then and not an unknown quantity. So that is impressive.
I was surprised he didn't get one for Jaws or E.T. prior to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was his first. And then Life is Beautiful had a crazy good reception, especially for a foreign film. It made $48.7 million in Italy, 57.6 million in the US and Canada, and 230 million worldwide. So not quite as much as Schindler's List, but you're talking about fairly unknown director, completely Italian film. All of the dialogue is in Italian except for the pieces that are in German. I mean, that's pretty great, and it was the highest. Good.
Yeah, that's crazy for a foreign film of that nature to get 230 million at that time. Like, yeah, that's crazy. That's a crazy good haul.
Highest grossing foreign film until Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon in 2000. So,
wow,
it's still the second highest grossing. So yeah, it's among the few.
That is impressive. Among
its other accolades, Pope John Paul II ranked it in his top 5 favorite films. I put that in here. And then it also was nominated for 7 Academy Awards and won 3. So it won Best Actor, and it was the first first performance by a male non-English performer to get the Best Actor win. It won for Best Foreign Language Film and then Best Original Dramatic Score. And it also won the Grand Prix at Cannes. Is that how you say it? I actually don't know.
Yes, I believe that is.
Okay.
Or
Cannes. Okay. Apparently, after winning the Grand Prix at Cannes, Benigni, the director, co-writer, starring guy, he kissed the feet of the jury president, who was Martin Scorsese. So after winning the Grand Prix, yeah, he evidently was a little bit known for his antics. Like at the Oscars, when he got the Best Actor nom, he was jumping over chairs to crawl to the stage. And then after getting the second award, he ran up. He's like, "This must be a mistake. I'm all out of English. I don't know what else to say." So he was kind of known for his crazy reactions and stuff. But yeah, so both of these films.
Yeah, that fits. I was going to say that fits. It shows on the film, I suppose, too.
100%. So yeah, that's a little bit of the intro of each of these films. They're both Holocaust movies, both with very different vibes.
Right.
What did we think, Graham?
Import- so I was going to say important to know here. So both of us, when we watched these films,
Mm.
we'd each seen one of these previously, but the other was brand new to us. So I have seen Schindler's List a handful of times. It is one of my favorite, honestly, just movies in general, but definitely for Holocaust war genre-ish movies. But I had never seen Life is Beautiful, and you had seen Life is Beautiful before, although it had been a while,
Mhm.
but had never seen Schindler's List before. So,
Right.
um, yeah, initially, so I'll start with Life is Beautiful, I guess. Then, yeah, it was such an interesting movie. Not not what I expected. I mean, you and I had talked a little bit beforehand about what the sort of tone and sort of the director's background, and setting up and sort of the concerns that uh, I guess his peers had before making the film, given the types of movies he made before, which were very comedic and not at all serious. And the fact that he was going to make a Holocaust movie, people were like, "What? Are you sure?" So I don't know. It was interesting. I didn't know what to expect, and getting in there, the first half of the movie is very lighthearted. You kind of trying to figure out where it's going a little bit too. Was not yeah. I don't know what I expected, but I wasn't necessarily expecting that. But it was interesting. Um, the dynamics were. I mean, after seeing how the second half worked, I get why he did the first half the way that he did, because it totally buys you into the characters
Mhm.
and their um, the way they react to life. Um, like I don't know. I guess it makes sense. It contributes to how when you see the horror going on around you in the second half of the movie, how that joyful spirit it's a lot harder to maintain um, throughout. And I think that it makes the first half of the movie kind of winding and you're kind of not sure where it's going, but the payoff works, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a ton of setup and payoff in Life is Beautiful. A ton. I agree completely. I forgot because I hadn't seen this movie since high school, so I had forgotten how long the first half was. I knew there was a first part where he's like winning over Dora, right? And kind
Hmm.
of their love story. I don't know why in my brain I was thinking it was like 20, 30 minutes, right? And then they get into like the Holocaust stuff. I don't know why I thought that because it's a full hour. It's like almost a
Yeah.
full hour. It's two acts, right? You have like a one whole act that's like its own story of him and Dora and him winning her over, and then you have like
Yeah.
a second act that's like a complete story with him being a father and going with his family into the concentration camps. Um, but I agree. I think if you don't have the first half, you could almost read a lot of his actions in the second half as like careless, right?
Yeah.
Like, what is he doing? He's kind of risking their lives, and like, why would he do this stuff just for like a joke? But it's not just for a joke, right? It's for like the whole, for one, protecting his son's innocence, but also there's this like message kind of that like, is life worth living if you don't have these moments of enjoyment and this fun even in the midst of tragedy, and like living your life the right way, right? And so the first step is all kind of, yeah, setting that up and showing you who he is and what his character Guido, what his character is like, and then showing how that plays into the acts of the second half. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree completely.
Yeah, and you're right though. If that first half is not done the way that it's done, the second half is interesting, but you kind of don't get it in the
Mhm.
same way. You think that this character is just in denial, but it's not that he's in denial. He is. I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no,
It's
I agree. I think the
it.
moment that it plays too that he's not in denial, right? It's very intentional. Is when he's walking his son home in the dark and he gets like lost and he sees the pile of bodies and it's like he's facing the tragedy, his son is facing away from it, and it's not that he's
Mhm.
unaware, but it's just that he wants to keep his son facing away from it and keep him innocent as best as he can.
Right, right. No, it's cool. It's an impactful. I don't know. It definitely puts you in a. It puts a question in front of you, I guess. If you were a parent in a situation like that, what would you do,
Mhm.
for your kid? What would be important? Would you want to tell them? Would you want to be honest? Or would you protect their innocence, in that way? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that necessarily. I don't know if I would have done it in the way that he did, but I also had never contemplated it like he,
Mhm.
so, yeah, I thought that was fascinating, and it made him such an interesting character and the links that he would go for his son there. Yeah, he's an interesting character. He's an interesting character for sure.
It definitely is.
Um, Full of life and full of giving. In the first part, you see it almost as like he's kind of selfish almost, not in a terrible way, but you know what I mean. Like he's
Yeah.
doing everything for himself in the first half of the movie, and then he's doing everything for his son in the second half too.
Mhm.
And to see that played out is really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll give my take on Schindler's List.
Okay.
It was awful. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I loved it. I think even like I obviously like know a decent bit about Schindler's List going in, right? Um, I know me and you had conversations about it beforehand, right? You had told me a little bit, I think, about the humor that's in it, and I had
Mhm.
still completely forgotten by the time I got to watch it. Until I started seeing the humorous moments, and I was like, "Oh yeah, Graham told me about this. He warned me." Um, but it still was a little bit of like a shock, I guess, when like the first joke happened, and I was like, "Oh, it's this type of movie," because it's still very Spielberg feeling. Like
Mhm.
it feels nothing like his other movies, and yet it still feels like Spielberg. I don't know
Right.
how both of those things are possible, but it does it.
Right.
But I thought it was super like I was prepared for it to be a hard watch, and I don't think I was still prepared enough, if that makes sense.
Right.
It
Right. There's no
yeah.
preparing, I don't think, for it. There's nothing you can do, really.
Mhm. And I think it's hard to balance showing a lot of the horror and still come off as respectful, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. And I think that he did it really well. I think you can tell it's made with a lot of heart and intention behind it. You care about almost all of the characters, even Amon Goth. Again, sorry for the pronunciations if that's terribly wrong. Even Ralph Fiennes' character.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say you care about him, but it's still no characters are not fleshed out, is what I'll say.
Yeah.
They all are given weight to them, and like the whole film feels like it has a ton of weight to it, right? Even in like the humorous moments, you still are never like fully like in Life is Beautiful. I feel like you can. There are moments you can almost forget about the Holocaust part, right? Especially like in the first half. There's a lot of lightheartedness to it. It doesn't feel heavy. Schindler's List
Mhm.
feels heavy the entire way through, start to finish. You
Right.
just like, feels like this like rock, right? That you're like having to pick apart and dissect, and it's like got all these crystals inside of it, but it's a process to break through this big chunk of rock. Um, yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, I actually liked that it showed a lot of the violence. I feel we've talked about this before that I'm not a big violence person in movies. I think a lot of it is unnecessary. Um, and a lot of it is just done for like the shock and awe kind of, right? Especially in horror movies. I just don't I think it's kind of a thing. But in this movie, I mean, of course it's a Holocaust movie, so it makes sense why it's there. It's done with intention, and all of the violent parts hit.
Mhm.
I don't think any of them are not impactful. Um, Shooting it in black and white, great choice. It
Yeah.
feels so real, which I know was his intention, right? He wanted it to feel like all the documentaries and footage you see, um, and it worked. Yeah, all of it just worked. I don't even know what to say about it. It was such a like it's a 3 hour long. I would call it a masterpiece that at the
Mhm.
same time is so hard to watch, and I don't want to rewatch it.
Yeah. I think the best description of the impact of it is still my fiance Nicole's when she watched it the first time, and she gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and she said I would never watch this movie again.
Yeah.
Because it was that hard. It's that hard to watch. Thankfully, it didn't hit me in the same level that I watch it plenty of times. But yeah, it is a kind of a masterpiece. Yeah, and you're right. It has a totally different tone to it. I mean, there's still the humorous moments, but at no
Mhm.
point are you ever not in the reality of this is serious stuff. From the very beginning when you see um, the Jews, they're getting getting shoveled out of their homes and things like that, and slowly but surely their rights and stuff are getting taken away, and they're sort of rationalizing it. I remember I forget what the characters' names are, but there's the rich family who are getting put into the concentration camp and get their home, and they talk about how I think the husband's like, it can't get it's okay, this is fine, this isn't that bad, and the wife is like, what do you mean, this is as worse as it could possibly be.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh no, oh no.
I wrote down in my notes watching it the quotes, "It couldn't be better. It could be worse." Right? Because
Yeah.
that's another thing is the juxtapositions in the film are great, right? With the cuts between the different parts showing the comparisons of like Schindler's life and, you know, the life of everyone living in the ghetto.
And this is the same moment that he's taking over their house, which is
Yes.
lavish and has this beautiful bed and all this stuff, and he's like relaxing on the bed and puts his arms back and is evaluating his newfound riches. Meanwhile, they're evaluating their newfound, poverty.
Yeah. And the humor of that moment too, it's like a little bit, I don't know what the word for that type of humor is. It's not slapstick, but like where you have Schindler saying, "Oh, it couldn't be better," and then you cut to them, "Oh, it couldn't be worse." And then lo and behold, people start walking into the apartment, and it's like, "Oh, it's worse." It's like that scene in the like all the sitcoms where it's like, "Oh, it couldn't get worse than this," and it starts raining, right? It's like
Right.
it's like almost like a tropey thing, but it still works in the film, and it doesn't play off like that. And I don't know how they managed to get it to not play off as like cheesy or corny, but they did. It worked so well. I think it's
Yeah.
because of the subject matter, right? It's because it's with something serious, so you feel a little less like it doesn't feel trivial, right? It feels like it could actually be worse, and we know that it will get much worse than them just
Right.
having to move into a shabby place. It's going to get a lot worse than that for them. So I think it's also part of that. What is it called? Dramatic irony, when the audience
Yeah.
knows something that the characters don't, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this film is. I think Amon, once again, if that's how you pronounce it, is one of the most interesting villains that I have seen in a movie. He is so complex and yet so purely evil, and yet you don't I don't know, man. It's hard to put into words how evil he is and yet how interesting he is at the same time. And yet
Right.
he still has moments that are like you understand he is still human. He's just very evil in the same sense. It's fascinating.
Yeah,
I'm dying to know what you think about
I
that.
agree. I was thinking about this. I think because I watched this in a few different parts, right? So after watching one of the parts where I took a break, right, I was thinking a lot about his character,
Mhm.
and I couldn't. This is everything I couldn't figure out, right? Like thinking about how other movies do things and like the formula of it or whatever, right? It feels like he should almost be like a caricature type villain, right? Like the Voldemorts or the the people who are just so evil and like it's just I'm just evil for
Another
evil's
Ralph
sake.
Fiennes character, funny
But
enough.
yeah, I know. I was thinking too. I was like, this is a great audition for the character for the role of Voldemort. Like I can 100% see how he got that role after this. Um, but like he's one of those villains, right? That is just. I mean, I'm probably minimizing Voldemort's motivations or something, but you know what I mean. Those types of villains that are just villain for villain's sake, and they're just evil, and they just want power, and there's not really a whole lot to them. There's not a lot of complexity, and they just feel like this caricatured, like kids show villain.
Right.
He could very easily have felt like that because you're right, he is like so just evil. But
It's so easy for a Nazi character to be that,
yeah,
like they are perceived in modern culture as like the utmost evil,
hmm
right? And it's so easy to just go into that, like a Hitler type. It's like, oh, they're just ultimate evil, like a Voldemort, like you're saying.
right. But it still plays like he does feel more well-rounded than that. He feels more complex than that. And I think honestly what does it more so than anything is how Schindler sees him, because
Mhm.
Schindler does not see him as evil. Schindler
Mhm.
doesn't see, right, how he truly acts, right, and all these things. And he gives him the benefit of the doubt, right, when he's talking to Stern. Is that his
Mhm.
name? Ben
Mhm.
Kingsley's character? When he's talking to
Yeah.
Stern and he says, I wrote down some of what he says. Let me see if I can find it. Um, about how war brings out the worst in people, always the bad, never the good. He can't
Right.
enjoy killing. He can't enjoy it, right?
Right.
He's like standing up for him. He's like, you don't understand him, right? It's just the war brings out the worst. He can't enjoy this. He's just put in this position. He has to do it. The poor guy, right?
Right.
So I think the fact that Schindler wants to believe in like the best of him makes us, and he, he gives him the whole speech about power, and we see him on Try It Out for a very brief time.
What a scene. Oh my gosh, when he's in there and he's like, I pardon you. And he tries it and he's like playing it out to see how he feels about it. And he tries it a few times. And then he ultimately is just like, no, I can't. And then you see the gunshots when the kid's walking down the stairs, and he misses like once. I don't forget if he misses once or twice, but then the third time, I think he missed twice. Yeah. And the third time you see the body laying there on the ground.
I
like,
love
oh
how
my
that was shot.
Gosh,
Also,
what a scene.
So I know Steven Spielberg did not, like, he didn't put a lot of, I don't know if thought is the right word, because you can definitely see it in there. Cinematography was not his main concern in this movie, right? This is a guy who like just like did the dolly zoom in Jaws, right? Like he's known for his camera work, and in Schindler's List he was like, no, we're gonna do all handheld. I want it to feel real. I don't want it to be this showy movie. I want it to feel like you're there, right? Great choice. Right. But there are still like these moments where the composition of the shots is just still so good. I mean, it won for best cinematography, and he shot on all handheld cameras. I don't think he can help himself. Like, it's just like ingrained in him, right, to do these great shots. But that shot in particular is one that I loved, the reveal of, you see like the slow pull in on Amon, in the mirror processing, I just pardon this guy, I pardon you, right? Playing with it. Yeah, playing with it a little bit. And you can't tell if he likes it or not. I couldn't in that moment anyway. You can't really tell which way he's going. And then you cut to the kid being shot at. So we have the reveal, oh, he didn't like it, but then he's missing. So I was like, this is the guy who was like shooting, wasn't he shooting at one point like behind his back in the movie and stuff? I almost read into it a little bit. And I was like, maybe he's still conflicted, right? Maybe we're seeing him like devolve into it. And this is like, he's going to shoot at him and then he's going to give up because he missed a couple times, right? Kind of like the guy where the gun jams and they eventually just like walk away and let him go. Like I was like, maybe this is one where he's going to.
Ridiculous scene.
We'll get into that. But I was thinking that was going to be the same kind of play out, right? Where he misses a couple times, then maybe he just gives up. And then you cut away. You're following someone walking down the sidewalk. So you cut away from the kid being shot at. And then you hear the gunshot stop and you pan back and you just see his body there. Oh, the dramatic reveal it was so beautifully shot. So you're like even when he's given up and is shooting at the kid, I was still in doubt as to whether or not he was actually going to kill him. All the way up until you see the body laying there. I feel like it always plays on these little moments of like hope. Right? There's like some snag. You're like, maybe this time. And then it does some dramatic reveal where it's like, nope, it still ends up just as bad as it was before.
And I think one of the interesting things, there's so many, you say that there's so many moments where there's like this faint hope of like, maybe it won't go badly, right? The scene with the gun, right? Where it's jamming, this scene here where maybe you're hoping that he's not going to do anything bad, like Amon's not going to do anything bad, especially with any of the scenes where he's like going crazy, right? And it totally puts you into the mindset of if you were in that camp and how they feel, like, because that's all they have to go on, right? Things are so bad, but yet you are just hoping. They're like, maybe it's gonna work out. Maybe it's gonna be okay. Maybe the gun's gonna jam. Maybe he's not gonna be mad today. Maybe he's gonna be, lenient. Maybe the war's gonna end. Everything that they're going through is like they're just living on this almost denial / hope / whatever you want to call it. And it's very faint, but that's like all you have to go on. So that's kind of what they've got, and it puts you as the viewer in that too, in that moment of like, well, maybe he's gonna miss. Maybe he's gonna give up. Maybe he'll stop.
Yeah. And I think the different characters play out hope like differently too. So you also have a diverse range of how they're processing that hope. Like Ben Kingsley's character, right, Stern, is very much leaning into the hope, right? He's like, I'm going to keep hoping. He has that kind of like, I feel like he is maybe one of the only true good characters in this, like completely good characters, because I don't remember seeing a moment where I was like, oh, well, he kind of made an iffy choice there. He seems to be pretty towing the straight line all the way through of the good man, right?
Right.
But he's kind of the one leading into like, no, we have to keep the hope up. I'm going to keep the hope up. He's kind of driving that hope and driving the good actions, driving Schindler to see that he has this power and he needs to lean into his good nature that he, I'm sure, knows is there, right?
Right.
But then you have M. Beth David's character, Miss Honey from Matilda. What is her name?
I
I feel like it starts with an H.
Are you talking about Helen?
Yes, Helen.
Yeah, the servant. Yeah.
Helen Hirsch.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like she almost doesn't want the hope. Like I feel like at moments she just wants it to be over, right?
Yeah.
She's like, this guy likes me, so I'm still alive. I'm still here, and he treats me a little bit better, ? Like, not really. He doesn't treat her well, but he probably treats her better than she would if he wasn't infatuated with her, right?
Right.
If she were another, servant, I don't know what her exact title is, servant. If she were another servant that he was not attracted to, then she probably would have been killed a long time ago. So he's kind of treating her better, and it's one of the reasons she's surviving, but at the same time she hates it.
Right. Because she doesn't know. It feels like a ticking time bomb, and it's the dread of knowing that it could happen at any moment is too much. So she's almost just like resigned to like, I'm just gonna die.
Yeah.
I've just got to make peace with it because I can't keep on living with the hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love there's just so much complexity, like all throughout the film. There's a lot of complexity. I want to point out some Spielberg moments. So I loved the lead in to introducing the character of Schindler because it reminded me so much of Indiana Jones, right? Where you're seeing like the kind of the situation surrounding him first, right? In Indiana Jones, right, you see kind of like flashes of his. I think you pan up, right, his like wardrobe, you see his whip, you see his hands, you see like all of this stuff first. You see his whip fly out, and then he steps into the light, and it's this reveal of his face. It's really dramatic, right? And that's how you introduce a hero.
Right.
Schindler, the whole question of the movie is he a hero? To me, right? It's what makes a person a hero, what makes a person good. And so the whole movie you're asking, is Schindler a hero? Right? A lot of the good he did for most of the movie was not to do good. It was out of selfish motivation. Does it still make someone good? Does it still make someone a hero? So I thought it was interesting that they have that same kind of character introduction where you're watching him get ready, you're watching him walk into the place, you're watching him bribe people before you finally get this like pan to his face. And it feels like a hero's introduction, but with the whole movie we're going to be asking ourselves if he really is one. Right.
Right.
But I was just like, that was such a Spielberg character introduction. It was nice to see it at the beginning of the movie because I wasn't sure if this was going to feel like other Spielberg movies. So it was nice to see.
A little nugget. Yeah. You're like, all right. I noticed who this director is.
And the little bits of comedy. I like that he's just had his mark on it. I want to talk more about the juxtaposition that I saw in it. Like the different scenes that were. So you have the shaving scene with Amon and Schindler where they're both kind of facing opposite directions doing the same thing. And I'm not going to lie, I've still thought about that since then, and I can't fully decide on what I want to interpret that scene as, because I feel like it's saying that they're similar characters, or maybe that they both have similar opportunities, right? Like if Schindler didn't lean into his goodness and his humanity, that he could have maybe ended up going more of Amon's way, and maybe vice versa, but we saw Amon kind of try out goodness, and it didn't work out too well, so I don't know completely about that, but I really like that scene. Again, I don't really know how I interpret it, but
yeah, that's interesting. I mean, they definitely are both opportunists, right? They see the circumstances and they want to use it to benefit themselves, right? Obviously, they have a business deal that ends up being profitable for both, at least for a while. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if that's how it. I don't know how to interpret that scene either. I think you're right, though. I think Amon definitely has. He tries to get there, but he's just not capable.
Yeah.
Whether he's always incapable is hard to know. But from what we see of him, it feels like he truly is incapable. And that is the thing that is different about the two. Yeah. But they do have some similarities in terms of that they both have power, in terms of Schindler with money, perhaps, and Amon with quite literally, power from the Nazi government. But they both have power, and they can both choose to wield it however they want to, I guess. And
Right.
they do it slightly differently, but I don't know. I don't know, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
I also think an interesting thing with Amon, like I wrote down halfway through, Amon has no self restraint. That's like and then I was thinking about all the times in the movie where he shows that he does not have self restraint. It's like a common thread of his character, right? He can't keep himself from getting drunk, and he like reveres Schindler. He's like, he's like, how do you not get drunk? I get drunk
Yeah.
every time I drink or whatever. He can't keep himself from killing people. He can't let himself even like with the scene with Helen, right? Where he decides to go crazy and like beat her. It's like he can't even restrain himself from some kind of like emotional reaction. Like the one he really wants to take, he feels incapable of doing. So he has to let it out some way so that he just, goes the opposite way and switches the switch and goes to violence, right? It's like he has this just like innate thing that has to be let out and he just can't not do it. Like he doesn't know how to restrain himself at all.
Right.
Well, I think that maybe goes back to his desire for power. He desires power, he desires money, he desires all these things. And the more you get into this mentality of taking and receiving and, it's about me, the less you want to restrain because it's about what you can get. And restraint is all about, pulling yourself back to benefit others.
Right. Once you start taking, you feel the drive to take and take and take more and more and more. You're never satisfied when you get there.
Right.
And he definitely demonstrates that. He's just, well, all right, what today? What more can I exercise?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a good thing this movie is 3 hours too. Because I don't think I would have bought Schindler's Turn if it hadn't played out so slowly. It's very, very methodical. And then once he decides that he's in, right, he's leaning into this goodness inside of him and he's going to try to help them out. He's like all in. Because if there's one thing we see about Schindler, he doesn't do anything halfway.
Right.
So once he's decided, like, okay, this is who I am, he leans into it. And that's when he starts, going around and don't you have the Sabbath to prepare for? And, he's fully in it. He's fully in that mode of, that's what he knows how to form relationships. He knows how to work people, and he's always done it for his own benefit. And then at the end, we get to see him do it for the benefit of others. And it's still that all in mentality, right?
Right.
But it's just with a different focus.
And it works too, because if he had gone to that place 50% into the movie, it probably still doesn't have the same impact. It truly builds the whole. I mean, it's a slow build, and you see it's never like it's not truly a flipping of the switch. Like he's getting more closer and closer that whole time, but he still has to bridge that final gap, of which it's truly he's no longer thinking and even saying that it's about him, right? Because even in those moments, there are other moments where he's still doing it. He's still saying he's doing it for himself, even when he might not be anymore, right? But he's still telling himself that that's why he's doing it. And then he finally crosses that bridge of that he's no longer denying it to himself either. I think like the water cars or the cars with the water hose and things like that. And he's doing all that. Even then, he's doing this thing that is very clearly like for their benefit, but yet he's still not like he's still telling himself even at that moment that he's he hasn't come to that realization himself. He's just kind of doing it. It definitely makes it more believable for something that would have otherwise seemed cheesy or hard to believe. It made it real, like a real human going through this progression rather than a movie character.
Yeah, absolutely. Another scene that I thought of when you mentioned that doing the good thing but saying it's for something else was getting Stern off the bus or off the train. And that was something that I was like watching and I couldn't tell at that point if it was, because it's still a fairly early one. So I feel like that's like if the water cars is a 75%, right, for the benefit of others, and that 25% is his denial, right? Then I feel like the train, getting Stern off the train is like a more 50-50. Right.
I was going to say, I even feel like it's less than 50 at that point. I still feel like at that point, he's still thinking business and he's thinking, I'm about to lose my guy who can make all this money for me, Like I don't think he wants ill to happen
Right.
to him, but I think he's still in that place at that point where he's still looking out for his business more so than the person.
Right. Yeah. I think of you mentioned that like you don't want ill to happen. I was thinking about that at one point when I was watching it. There's the when I was in nursing school, very briefly, they have these like I forget what they were called. Not creeds, but they're these like vision statements, I guess. I don't know, I forget what they were called. But basically like just words that were supposed to define you as like a nurse or a healthcare professional, right? And one of them was benevolence, so wanting to do good. But then the other was, I'm gonna blank on the word. It's not wanting to do harm, which is different, right? There's a difference between wanting to do good and wanting to do no harm.
Right.
And both of those were supposed to be mentalities of a nurse. The nurse was supposed to embody both of those things. But I just think it's interesting that you can embody one without the other, right? And I think at the beginning we see Schindler with the wanting to do no harm, even though it's pretty much for the benefit of himself, right? To wanting to do good for the benefit of others. And then tying it all together with the scene at the end. That scene at the end is phenomenal with the, just one more. How many people could I have saved with this? How many with this car, with this pin, right?
Yeah.
This pin, this is one life for this, right? Oh, it plays out so well. And it's not, I feel like the emotional breakdown could have been cheesy if it was a less perfect movie, right? But you've earned it at that point. You've earned the tears.
I feel like, and this is where I'm gonna. So I'll admit I haven't seen every Liam Neeson movie that he's been in or anything like that, but I can't even think of anything close to how good he is in this in his career. Like the way he can play both of those characters, like he's this charismatic, almost playboy, life of the party guy, and for him to get to that moment and to do that scene and to have those emotions, and to make that believable, like, man, both for the character is incredible for the character and for the movie, but also for the acting of it. Because you're right. Like that is not an easy scene to make believable. It could be really cheesy really quickly, and it is not. It is fully earned, and I think I am overcome in that, not even just by his emotions, but by everyone else's emotions around him, and telling him, comforting him almost in that moment as he's about to leave.
Yeah.
That is the most impactful thing. That's the part that, it overflows you with the emotions of what they see in him and what he did for them. Yeah, man, an all-timer right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you heard the story of how Liam Neeson got the role as Schindler?
No, I have not.
I'm gonna butcher it because I don't remember it completely. But I think it was basically he was doing a play while he was auditioning, or after he had auditioned, he was in the middle of doing this play, and Spielberg, because he was considering him for the role, went to go see the play, and I forget who was with him. If it was like his mother-in-law, his wife, someone, a family member, a female relative of Spielberg's went with him. And so then after he sees Liam Neeson in this play, he loved him, right? He goes backstage to his dressing room to go talk to him, and the female counterpart that was with him just loved Liam Neeson in that play. So she sees Liam Neeson, and she told him that she just thought he was amazing, and he's so thankful, and he gave her a hug, and I think he said something that was still a little bit like charming, but not like completely like, not gonna be like, oh no, thank you, I don't deserve it, or anything like that. Like it was still like accepting the gratitude, but it was like in this charming way. And I think Spielberg saw him, and he was like, this feels like how Schindler would react in this situation. Like still has that goodness of heart, like giving her the hug and stuff like that, but also has this like charm and the bravado about him, right? Like he doesn't feel small at the same time.
Right. Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
So so he was like, Liam Neeson is literally not small. He's huge. I didn't know that until I was doing research, but I think he's like, how tall is he? He's 6'4".
He's so big. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's literally not small, but even just how he presents himself, right? He doesn't feel like a small character. He kind of commands the room. So yeah, Spielberg saw him in that interaction with his female relative, and he was like, "Yep, that's Oscar Schindler right there." Warren Beatty was considered for the role at one point, and Spielberg ended up not going with him. And I think the reason why he said was that he felt like Warren Beatty would do Schindler through Warren Beatty's eyes, and he didn't want a well-known actor to play Schindler. He wanted someone who was going to embody Oscar Schindler as completely as he could, and that was Liam Neeson.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Mel Gibson was also considered for the part.
Now that would have been an interesting take. Oh my gosh. I wonder. I'm looking up. I'm trying to see what movies. Yeah, so this really was Liam Neeson's big movie.
I was gonna say I've seen Taken. I think that might be the only other, that and Chronicles of Narnia. Doesn't he voices Aslan, right?
Yes, he
Okay.
does.
I was gonna say I think those are the only other Liam Neeson movies I've seen.
Got it.
Oh, well, Star Wars. I forgot about Star Wars.
Right. But that's still after.
Yeah.
That's still after. Yeah, I don't think that I have seen him. I haven't seen him in anything. I haven't seen anything that he did before this movie. And honestly, most of these movies I haven't even heard of. Apparently he was in Pilgrim's Progress.
I didn't know that was
in
a movie.
1978, and he played Jesus Christ. So
Oh.
how about that? Did not know. But yeah, so this was like his big thing. The other things that I'd seen him in, in the 90s eras, he did he did Les Miserables in 98, and then Star Wars, and yeah, at that point he was fairly big, and he did like Gangs of New York and things like that. But yeah, so this really was, so that makes sense then. He was not as well known of a quantity at that point. So he really was Oscar Schindler.
I find it interesting too. I feel like the most of the stuff he's done since then have been action-y type roles.
Yeah.
That's kind of what he's known for. And I'm surprised he hasn't made as much of a name for himself in dramatic roles. I don't want to say he hasn't done dramatic roles, because he probably has, and I just probably haven't seen them. But I feel like he hasn't made his name for that as much. And he's got the chops for it, at least from Schindler's List.
Right.
But maybe he just likes doing stunts,
I guess so. You know what? I guess if you make enough money and you reach a certain age, you can kind of just pick the movies and the genres that you enjoy. So maybe he likes that, because he certainly does enough of them. But yeah, this is such a different field than Taken.
100%. Yeah.
Oh man. No, that's great. All right. Do you have any closing thoughts, Hannah, about either one of these two movies?
Closing thoughts. I had some facts that I don't fully remember what I have. Did you know the film Schindler's List, right, is based on the book Schindler's Ark by Thomas Keneally. Do you know how that book got written, essentially?
I do not.
So, what's his name? Poldek, otherwise known as Leopold, is his first name, but the character Poldek in the movie, right, has the shirt, and when he goes into the church and Schindler sits down and asks him where he got a shirt from, right, that guy.
Yes.
The actual real life Poldek, Leopold, after all of the events that take place in Schindler's List, he wanted to tell the story to everyone. He was like, this is going to make such a good book, this is going to make such a good movie, like someone has to write this. I think at the time it was a book, but he was like, someone has to write this story. So he moves to LA, moves to California, in part because he wants this to get made, right? And he opens up like a leather goods shop, and anyone who comes in who will listen to him, he'll tell them about how his life was saved by this man named Oscar Schindler, right? And that he was a Jewish Holocaust survivor. And one day this guy named Thomas Keneally walks in, and he's a writer, and Poldek sees him and says, "Oh, you're a writer? Well, you have to hear the story. It would make a phenomenal story. It would make a phenomenal book." Tells it to him. Thomas Keneally is like, "Yeah, this would make a great book." So he ends up doing the research and writing the book. And then lo and behold, Spielberg comes across it years later and decides to make it, into a movie. And the rest is history. But I think it's interesting that one of the characters in the movie is the whole reason why it was a movie in the first place.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah. And then Spielberg originally did not want to direct this. Did you know that?
I did know this, yes,
Yeah.
and the fact he felt like he wasn't mature enough to make it, which is
Mhm.
that's wild. And he wanted Roman Polanski
Yeah.
to do it.
Of the
Yeah.
pianist fame, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
which he had
it is very
evidently had survived the Holocaust as a
right.
kid and said it was
So he
too
had
close to
actual
home.
connection to it.
Yeah.
That's why he felt like that he'd be more appropriate, because he had actually been impacted by it.
Yeah.
I'm very thankful he did not, and that he did it his
Yeah.
way. Because
I'm also
I've seen The Pianist as well, and
Mhm.
it's a decent movie, but it's not
It's not
at the
Schindler's List.
level.
I have not
No.
seen The Pianist. I want to. It's on my list, but I have not seen it. I'm also glad Martin Scorsese didn't direct Schindler's List because he was originally also going to direct it at one point.
Yeah.
Um, and then
Yeah.
he traded. What was it? He traded Cape Fear with
Mm.
Spielberg. So Spielberg was working on Cape Fear, gave Scorsese that, and Spielberg took Schindler's List. I also think it's funny that Scorsese has a connection in both of these because he was
Yeah.
originally going to direct Schindler's List, and then he's the one who got the feet kissed by Benigni at the Cannes Film Festival.
Uh, there's nothing there's if there's anything true about Hollywood, it's that Scorsese's been around forever and is enough to touch everything.
Yeah, we should do like a Scorsese counter every time he gets brought up in a podcast episode. I don't know what the prize would be, but
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
and Spielberg evidently did not want to make money from the film. He said it would be blood money. So he actually,
Wow.
yeah, he used all the funds to start the USC Showa Foundation, which is like a not-for-profit that I think deals with the documentation of Holocaust survivors and their stories.
Huh.
Yeah, so he refused to make any profit from it, which
That's
I thought was
cool.
really interesting. And that goes back to like you can just kind of tell this movie was made with like a lot of like heart and integrity.
Right.
So I
'Cause
wasn't like super
otherwise,
surprised hearing that. I'm like, I mean, it makes sense.
yeah, you don't make a movie like this to make money.
Hmm.
Like I mean, so I'm sure the
Someone
studio
would.
did. But yeah, that's cool. That I mean,
Yeah.
that just shows once again it was a movie that was made to tell the right story.
Yeah. And then Life is Beautiful was in part based on the book In the End, I Beat Hitler by Salmoni, who was an Italian Jew. And he wrote a book telling about how he went to the Holocaust, or he went to Auschwitz, sorry, during the Holocaust. When he got out, he was reunited with his parents and then found out that his brothers had been killed. But he used a lot of like dark humor and irony in his book. So Benigni said that he wanted to commemorate Salmoni as a man who wished to, quote, live in the right way. And then he was also partly inspired by his own dad, Luigi Benigni. Benigni, I think is how you would say it. But he was actually in the film. He's like an extra. He was in the Italian army and spent 2 years in a Nazi labor camp. And when he told his kids all of his stories to avoid scaring them, he would use a lot of humor. And he said that was also part of what helped him cope with it. But Roberto Benigni, who directed the film, explained his philosophy, and this is a quote from him: "To laugh and to cry comes from the same point of the soul, no? I'm a storyteller. The crux of the matter is to reach beauty, poetry. It doesn't matter if that is comedy or tragedy. They're the same if you reach the beauty." So
Wow.
I just thought that was an interesting backstory to his inspiration for wanting to make it. And then his wife starring in the film with him, I think once she got that he was coming from a genuine place of wanting to tell this story and do justice to these actual survivors and the tell the story of kind of just the human spirit and the endurance of the human spirit, that's when she got on board. She's like, okay,
Right.
I'll be in it then. And she was a serious film actress, evidently. She had been in like dramas and very weighty types of films. So it was a bit of a different role for her, but she was like, I'll do it.
Wow. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And the title comes from a quote by Leon Trotsky. So he was in exile in Mexico, waiting, basically knowing that he was going to be killed by Joseph Stalin, right, by one of his assassins. So he's waiting for his death in Mexico. He sees his wife walk out into their garden, and he wrote that in spite of everything, quote, life is beautiful. The full quote is, "Life is beautiful. Let the future generations cleanse it of all evil, oppression, and violence, and enjoy it to the full."
Wow.
Yeah,
Really cool. That's really cool.
that's all I got.
Awesome. Well, sounds good.
Do you have any closing statements, Graham?
Oh man, um, this was really enjoyable to get to watch both of these. I particularly enjoy getting to watch Life is Beautiful with you. That was really neat,
Yeah, awesome.
and not in our original plan to get to do. It was really hard to not talk about it while we watched it because it was a lot of just wow moments. Yeah, it was fun. It was like I said, it was different. Um, it was interesting to do a foreign language film like that, and also one done in Italy too, because I feel like that's an underserved um, setting for
Mhm.
Holocaust and World War II, type of movies and things like that. I feel like
Right.
mostly it's focused on either Germany or Poland or somewhere in that area, right? But to do it in Italy was kind of cool. Um,
Yeah.
and then yes, and there's this. It's just an incredible movie. I'm always impressed by the range of Spielberg and how many things he can do. Like the fact that he can do this and he can do Saving Private Ryan, as two very distinct war movies with their own characters and yet so impactful. Yeah, it's impressive. Um, so enjoyed the heck out of watching both of them.
Yeah. Well said. So we have one game that we're gonna end the episode with. It's called Casting Call. So we're gonna decide if they were gonna remake the film today, who would you cast in the main roles? We got two films. Um,
Gosh,
this is a hard one.
this is
For
gonna
what
be really hard.
I feel like I can't say who I would cast in Life is Beautiful because I feel like part of it's what makes
It's
it good.
him.
It's him. Like he
Yes.
is the center of it. Like he I don't know. I don't think I would want to cast someone else. I feel like that's a
Right.
cop out answer, but I don't want to cast someone else.
No, it really does speak to the uniqueness of the performance, and how much he carries that performance. Um, yeah, it's hard to imagine somebody else doing it like that, and it's also it does make it more difficult too because it's a foreign language film.
Right.
Um, so you can't imagine having like Tom Cruise
Right.
play that role, right? it just makes that you're like, I can't see it.
I'll
I
say
just
if we had to put the foreign language aside, because I probably cannot
yeah,
even name for you enough Italian actors to
right.
make a good argument for any of them. But if I had to put the foreign language aside, I feel like maybe a comedic actor who can bring the heart in the same way that Robert Benigni can as Guido would maybe be, and he's not here anymore. Robin Williams.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be made today. It would have to be made quite a few years ago. But I feel like he's the most recent actor I can think of that would maybe do justice to a role like that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. It's hard to imagine somebody being able to do this role, but Robin Williams is one of those guys who, you just you just can't you couldn't put a limit on him.
Yeah.
So if anybody could, he could. I'll give you another one, who can do comedy but also emotion on the same level is Jason Sudeikis.
Yeah.
I feel like he could be somebody who could convey the duality of that, and I could definitely see him in a role being a dad trying to keep his son from experiencing or understanding the horrors going on around him. I don't know. I could definitely see him in a role like that and doing well in it.
Yeah.
So he would be my choice there.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Who would you cast for Schindler?
Gosh, I was trying to think about this earlier because it's tough because you need somebody. I don't know. It's interesting. Like I feel like you need somebody who's charismatic, but I also don't really associate Liam Neeson with being, like I said, from the other movies that I've seen him in. He's not the most charismatic of actors in other movies.
Right. You probably wouldn't have
You know,
known that he is charismatic if you hadn't seen him in this.
right, exactly. Um, so yeah, that's hard to say. Oh man, I was almost thinking like, I don't even know if I feel good about this choice. Uh, but like Henry Cavill, I feel like he has the demeanor of somebody who can be cares about. I could see him in the party scenes,
Mhm.
in the evening, making toasts and things like that. I could see him in those types of scenes very easily.
Yeah.
Whether he could get to that level of the scene at the car when he's holding the pen and saying "another person," that I don't know.
Mm.
But I could see him doing a lot of that, and he can play a little bit of a selfish character too. So
Mhm.
he'll be the name that I throw out there.
Yeah. I thought of oh, who did I think of now? Let's see. Oh, Christian Bale. But I
Oh,
don't know because I feel like Christian Bale does have. I don't know. When I think of like Christian Bale and like American Psycho, have you
mm-hmm.
seen American Psycho?
I actually have not.
Okay, I didn't
That's
think you
one that I
had.
need to watch.
He's like it's it's kind of satirical, so it's difficult to put it in the same camp. But he's still got like this. He plays like a Wall Street guy who's supposed to be like in the upper crust of society. So I just feel like he could play that like the selfish part.
Yeah,
But I feel like he could also pull off the end, I mean, we've talked about Christian Bale before, I know, and you've talked about how transformative of an actor he is, right? There was like the one
yeah.
role he got. What was the movie where he got lost a lot of weight?
Oh, The Machinist.
The Machinist, right? So I feel like I mean I know he's a pretty dedicated
And then
guy. I
and
feel
then
like he could do it.
I was gonna say for Vice, he went the other way,
Right. Right.
and put on all the weight.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I could maybe see him just because I think he has a decent range to him. Um,
Yeah.
I'm not sold on that one either. I don't think anyone would do quite as much justice as Liam Neeson did, but
I thought of one more. I thought of
mm,
one more who maybe could. Daniel Day-Lewis. I feel like Daniel Day-Lewis would be a fit for this type of role because he would immerse himself in the character so much. Um, I could see him being able to pull this off too.
I might lose some cool points with you. I don't think I've seen a Daniel Day-Lewis movie.
Are you serious?
Looking
Oh man.
looking through his list of movies right now, I don't think I have.
Okay, so here's a hot take to end this podcast on. I don't think Daniel Day-Lewis is nearly as good of an actor as everyone makes him out to be,
Mhm.
but I do think he is good.
Okay.
There Will Be Blood is one of the best films that I've seen him do, and I think he's incredible in it. I've seen him in some other stuff where he's kind of cheesy, so that's why it's a hot take for me. I know everyone thinks that he's the type of guy. His, do you know the stories about him?
No.
How he famously will he basically for like Last of the Mohicans or something like that, he basically like lived like a Native American for like 6 months before they filmed the movie. He just does crazy stuff like that
Okay.
to immerse himself in the role. He like forgets that he's his own person and just like pretends that he's the character for like months and months, and he won't break character while they're filming. Like he's the most dedicated actor to
Yeah.
the craft like ever,
Very
which is
method.
why he only does like one movie every like 4 or 5 years maybe, and I don't think he even does that many anymore.
Gotcha.
But
Yeah, I know very little about Daniel Day-Lewis. I don't think I can. If you ask me, like, can you tell me one thing about Daniel Day-Lewis? I could not. I didn't even know how old he was when you said his name. I had to Google him real quick.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
for some reason, I think I was getting him confused with someone else, and I thought he was much younger. So when you said it, I was like, oh wait. I was like, he's pretty young, isn't he? No, he's not. Okay, so that's casting call. I think Ralph Fiennes, just keep him.
Yeah, you can't. I
You can't
cannot.
recast that role.
Perfect role for
Yeah.
him. Oh my gosh.
Absolutely, and he could
Yeah.
still do it today.
Okay, I'll give you one.
Okay.
Just because he's one of my favorite actors of all time, who can play anything, and he can definitely do something like this. Joaquin Phoenix he could be a total roach if he needed to be.
Yeah.
Seeing him in Gladiator in that role, which is a different type of role, but he could be a character like this. So
Good deal.
just my broad name.
All right, and then the very last piece of the podcast, we're going to do related recommendations. So, if you liked this film, we'll give you some films to check out. Graham, do you have any similar films?
So I have an interesting one that for Life is Beautiful. It's not really the same as Life is Beautiful, but it has a similar type of dynamic to it in terms of how the film is done, where there's like this part one of the film that is this totally different dynamic. It's like happy. It's, you're seeing the characters, you're seeing what's going on in their lives, and it's totally disconnected to anything about war, and then the whole second half is those characters being placed in that war setting. It's The Deer Hunter.
Oh, I thought you were
Uh,
gonna say Sound of Music.
oh no no no
That's
no
what I was
no!
thinking about other movies that are like that earlier, and that was the one that came to mind. It's also Holocaust, right?
That's
Second half of the
true.
movie, you get the Nazis.
That
So
is true. That's a
I
good
really
point.
thought you were going to Sound of Music. I'm sorry, I'll let you continue.
The Sound of Music is my mom's favorite movie. I have not watched that in a long time, but probably should. No, The Deer Hunter. Um, it admittedly is, in my opinion, it's a little long, the beginning scenes of it, but the whole scene is like a wedding at the beginning, and it's this group of friends back home in like a steel mill town, and they're at this wedding, and they're all just sort of like talking about life and where they're going and all this stuff. And then the second half of the movie is them in Vietnam. And they actually, there's not anything really about the war itself, is that they've been captured as like POWs, or at least some of them have. And then the story unfolds from there, and it's sort of like how they end up grappling with their reality, and some do better than others. So anyway, it just made me think of it in that same way. This format of like really happy, and just character development, and then it boom, just things blow up in the second half. So that's my recommendation from a stylistic perspective, anyway, for Life is Beautiful, because I don't really feel like there's a whole lot of movies that are like Life is Beautiful. That's why it's so
Yeah.
unique. But that'll be my one for that.
Okay. I think my Life is Beautiful recommendation is Jojo Rabbit, not because of any
Mm.
any similarities with composition or anything like that, but just because it is a Holocaust movie with comedy.
The tone, I can see
Tone
what
of
you
it
mean from
is a
the
little
tone.
similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got some great comedic moments, and it still has those heavier hitting scenes too, right? That drive the emotion in. So that's my recommendation. If you like Life is
Yeah.
Beautiful, Jojo Rabbit.
Gotcha. What do you got for Schindler's List?
I don't know. That's a hard one. It's like, what movie do you want to respect, but also like torture yourself watching? I don't really have a good one. I'm just gonna go Boy in Striped Pajamas, because it's another one of those like just it's a sad Holocaust movie.
Mhm.
Very different from Schindler's List. I wouldn't say it's nearly as good of a movie as far as the from the filmmaking perspective, but the story is really good. It's based on a book. I read the book first, then watched the movie in like high school, so it's also been a while since I've seen this movie.
Right.
I think I might have rewatched it a few years ago, but I would say if you want a Holocaust movie to make you cry, which is what I would put Schindler's List in that category. Boy in Striped Pajamas is also in that category, so that's my movie.
I'm gonna go two movies, because there's nothing that's the same, right, as Schindler's List, which is why it makes it so good. But I already mentioned Saving Private Ryan. That is like almost like if Schindler's List is the left hand, Saving Private Ryan is the right hand for Spielberg, anyway, when it comes to war movies and like definitive war movies for capturing a type of story. And in the same way that just like the horrors are on display in Schindler's List, and the lives and how they are dealing with it, and how courage is shown, and heroes, villains, and all that stuff. Saving Private Ryan is that for D-Day, right? And invading as the Allied forces and everything like that, and what they're going through, and plays on similar themes. And like I said, it doesn't pull any punches, but yet doesn't go to. It still has like some lighthearted moments in it, but just makes you feel a lot. So I'd be my one for that. Another one for more specifically for the Holocaust. Once again, different tone is Zone of Interest, which was a very interesting movie. It does not deal with the horrors in the same way, but the horrors are present on the outskirts. They're thoughts that you try not to let invade your happiness. But it involves some of the same themes that Schindler goes through, about like how you're justifying, what's going on, and it's to your benefit, and yada yada yada. It's one of those movies that plays on some of those themes and puts some of those thoughts in there unless you experience it from a character who's living it and, you know, trying to rationalize what's going on for their own benefit. So those would be my two.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, I think
Cool.
that wraps us up. Our first episode is in the books.
Excellent.
All
Sounds
right.
good. This has been fun, Hannah.
This has been fun, Graham. All right. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Talk to you later.